live. You're an official producer now.
I'm
Congratulations.
an official producer. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm a producer.
All right, say your name. Who are you and what are you producing?
So I'm Anka Poduraru, and I am hosting with Liz Layton this amazing event that got us so many messages before it, ahead of it. So this might be what we all are looking for.
And now you have to multitask. You have to talk and produce. Can you put our little nameplates up?
Yes. So let's.
Oh, look, there's me.
This is Liz.
Hey everybody, Liz Layton here with Club EG. We are so excited to be talking about the topic that always comes up amongst our freelancers and solopreneurs, which is, what do I charge? It's such an amorphous blob of a conversation, and we all have to figure it out together. Now, one thing, we will not be telling you what to charge. That's called price collusion, and we're not going to be doing that. But what we do have are two incredible perspectives that we're bringing on. Ilise Benun with marketing-mentor.com, so marketing mentor, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how you should think about structuring your pricing. And then Claus Raasted, highly overpaid rock star of a speaker and coach. We're going to find out why sometimes he charges $50,000 and sometimes he charges nothing. So figuring out this positioning and where you play and how you actually set your value is what today is all about. I am so excited to have all of them here. Anka, bring everybody up. This is so awesome. Hi, Ilise. Hi, Claus.
Hey, y'all.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, Ilise, let's start with you. How do you even know how to price people? What's your background? Who are you?
So for the last 36 plus years, I have been basically teaching creative professionals and solopreneurs how to price their services and market their businesses, because those two things are connected. And I do it in many different ways. I have a podcast. I have a plan that I sell. I have a magic money formula, which is going to be available later on. And I work one-on-one and in small groups with people, because the thing about pricing is that it's very subjective and case by case. And so when you talk about pricing, I really think it has to be done with each client in mind, each project in mind, as opposed to, here are my prices, take it or leave it. That's the main message.
That's incredible. Okay, Claus, tell us a little bit about you. How do you figure out pricing? You wrote the world's most expensive book on pricing. Is that correct? And what do you charge for this book?
It's pink.
Oh,
You
wait,
are.
we can't hear you. You're muted.
Now you're unmuted. Sorry, Claus.
Voila. So you didn't even hear the answer, even though I
We didn't.
ran into
What's it cost?
So I'll do it again. So this pricing expertise, which I co-wrote with Philip Fuchik, is priced at 560 euros for the book.
Incredible. How did you come up with the price?
Well, if you're doing a book on pricing expertise, then either the price should say nothing or it should say a lot. That's also what I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. And to answer how I got into this, well, I started out as a creative. And for many years, I was a hardcore creative. I built a creative company. I used to be the CEO and founder of the world's largest live action role play studio. Not that big, 50 people at our top, but reasonably big, and did crazy stuff. And then I crashed and burned 5 years ago and landed myself in about 1.1 million US dollars of personal debt. So I had to learn a little bit, and I had to learn how to actually run a business. And if you fail enough, then at some point you start to gain a little bit of wisdom. And one of the things I wish I'd learned before that I now help teach is many people who are creative entrepreneurs of one sort or the other, whether they do ice sculptures or they do business consulting or shine shoes, well, they care more about the craft and less about the business aspects of it. And I wish I'd learned that sooner. So now at least I get to help teach it to others, so they don't have to do the $1 million debt to find out. It's not a smart way.
No, but I keep being reminded that FAIL is an acronym for first attempt in learning. So we need to continue to fail forward and continue to learn from all of these things. So I'm so excited you're here to bring your wisdom from your failures to allow us to fail in a different way as we move forward. So Ilise, I would love to kick it off with you. I know that you've put together a little bit of a framework for us to think about how to do our pricing. So why don't we launch over to you and have you get our brain in the right place?
That sounds perfect. I am ready. So go ahead and bring up my screen. and I'm going to give a little presentation called Get Paid What You're Worth, because we're here to talk about mastering freelance pricing, basically. So sometimes I call this presentation Show Me the Money, because that's really what you have to do. And I also wrote a book actually called The Creative Professional's Guide to Money. And as I said before, I'm a business coach and I work exclusively with creative professionals. So if you think you're creative, I can probably help you. And I also host the Marketing Mentor podcast. And I mentioned also the Simplest Marketing Plan and Program, which is a year-long program I run and will start again in 2025. So let's talk about money. I love that phrase and I love the topic. But did you know that 43% of Americans, and I know we're talking to an international audience here, but my stats are American, 43% of Americans don't know how much money their spouse makes. That's how much people don't like talking about money. And 53% of men are more comfortable asking about salaries than women. That says something. So if you don't love the money conversation, know that you are not alone. But the thing is that when your work is personal, and most creatives are doing work that feels very personal, it's hard to separate that from the business side. But I love the money conversation, and I wanted to tell you why, because you can too. It puts me in a position of strength when I bring it up and when I talk about it. I come across as confident, even when I don't happen to feel that way. It shows my professionalism because often the other person you're negotiating with may not like talking about money either, but someone's got to bring it up, although not always. That doesn't always happen. I also make it easier for my collaborators and my clients when I talk about money and am comfortable talking about money because that makes them feel taken care of. And last but not least, I am just so much more likely to get what I need when I take control of that part of the conversation. So the big idea here is that the money conversation actually starts with what you say to yourself. And maybe in the chat, people can share if they say any of these things to themselves. I'm not a business person. Has anyone ever said that to themselves? Or what about, I don't like talking about money. I hear that constantly. But actually, I don't care if you don't like it because we need to do it. I don't like putting a price on my work. That also happens a lot with artists. Or I have to give them what they're asking for, whoever they are. They have to get what they're asking for. I'm not sure I agree with that. Instead, I would say I have to give myself what I need first. You definitely come first. So we're starting this hashtag, me first. Because if you don't value your services, I ask you, who will? So I wanted to start with a few ways to answer typical questions that you probably are asked. And the first one, the most common one, is what's your hourly rate? I'm not a big fan of pricing hourly. I'm sure Claus agrees with me, actually. And I think you should have other ways of pricing. Project pricing is one of the best ways, actually, a fixed price. But when someone says, what's your hourly rate? You don't have to answer that question with an hourly rate, with a number. You can say instead, that's not how I work. It's better for both of us if I give you a fixed price. That way you will know how much it will cost. And by the way, you as the provider will know how much you're earning. Otherwise, with an hourly rate, you have no idea how much you're going to earn. And you need that information for your cash flow, for your bank account. And then how much is a blank? Let's say you have something to do with websites. If someone says, how much is a website? You could say, that's like asking how much is a car? It depends really on what you're trying to accomplish. So tell me more. And that gets you into a conversation that leads to the money conversation. But you can't just answer, although a lot of people like to, oh, a website, that's $1,000. Oh, that's $5,000. That's $50,000. No, it depends. There are many different factors. So how much is a blank? You can also say, well, it can range from 4X's to 5X's, whatever those numbers are. Give a range. So let's figure out what's important to you, and then I will quote you a price. Don't let anyone rush you into quoting a price. That's a red flag for a bad client, in my opinion. And the reality is that numbers are magical. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. When you give people actual numbers, they suddenly know what their budget is. I would not ever ask, what's your budget? Not ever. But usually people don't know what their budget is, and therefore they say, I don't know. And then you're back to square one and you have to come up with a number. Instead, there are a couple different ways to put numbers on the table so that they actually know what they didn't know they knew, which is what their budget is actually. So you can start by giving them a spectrum. And my favorite line is, are you thinking 500, 5,000, or 50,000? Those are obviously not the prices. You can't sell something for either 500 or $50,000. So it's an absurd, those are absurd numbers for prices, but they're actually arranged so that people can say, oh, well, no, definitely not 50,000 or definitely not 500, right? And then they put themselves on your spectrum. That's what you need them to do. Or you can give them a choice. This is a variation on that theme. You can say, are you thinking in the hundreds or the thousands? And that, again, allows them to put themselves on a spectrum that you can respond to. Because I do believe that the good ones want to pay a fair price and they expect to negotiate. And I say this because often creatives, especially who don't like the money conversation, will just automatically take what's offered because they don't want to have the money conversation. But good clients who expect to pay a fair price want to negotiate. They expect to negotiate because that is a sign of professionalism. Otherwise, they may perceive you as a doormat, and we don't want that. You don't want to be a doormat. So I have 7 of what I call the worst negotiating mistakes. And I say the worst because they're actually the smallest, not the biggest. They're the smallest and the most imperceptible, and therefore the easiest to ignore, and therefore the most lethal to you and your business. Because negotiation really is a conversation. It's not a confrontation. People often come to it in a very defensive way, as if it were a confrontation, as if they have to justify everything. But I don't think you do. Just be open and curious and approach it as a conversation. And that will happen if you love the money conversation. So mistake number 1 is when they put a number on the table, which will sometimes happen. You just take it. You shouldn't just take it because that's their floor. They're going to start low. And if you accept what they offer, then you're leaving money on the table. So the solution to this is just to always ask for more. And I tend to ask for double first, what they asked for, what they proposed originally, and then you can find a number in the middle. And that is called a negotiation. Mistake number 2 is when you make the first offer, which will sometimes be the case, and you don't start high enough. You don't start with your ceiling. You have to start high so that you give yourself room to negotiate and you can come down. There's nothing wrong with coming down, especially if you start high. Mistake number 3 is that you make assumptions about what they can and cannot pay, as if you know what's in their bank account, as if you know who has left them money, as if you know what their budget is. Don't ever make assumptions. Instead, ask questions about this. Mistake number 4 is being impulsive and blurting out numbers. I have a client who said, this might be in my PowerPoint. She said, I either freeze or I blurt. And blurting is basically giving in to the pressure and the impulse of, I just want to say something. I just got to say something. Whatever you say, it's going to be either too high or too low, unless you're really good at this. So always take time to think. Mistake number 5 is being desperate and showing it, basically, and not having a backup plan. So you want to give yourself options, and the options could include marketing, right? When you market yourself, you have lots of different opportunities and prospects in your pipeline, and you won't feel as if you need this one or that one to come through. So don't put yourself in a desperate position. Always have a backup plan. Mistake number 6 is betraying your nervousness by talking too much. This has come up a lot lately for some reason with clients, is this over talking, this not knowing when to stop. And I think partially it's because we're afraid of silence. I'm just going to let there be a little silence because there's nothing to be afraid of. Even if you're nervous, let there be silence. Because the thing is that when there's silence, someone will try to fill it, and it could be them, and they could reveal information that you wouldn't even know to ask. That has happened so many times. So let there be silence. And finally, mistake number 7 is devaluing your services by cutting your prices before they even ask, right? Often people will say this is like self-talk also. Oh, they're not going to be able to pay that much, or oh, I can't really justify that price. I'm going to cut it down. If you have to adjust your pricing, then you be sure to adjust the scope of the project first. If someone asks you, this came up with a client recently, apparently she quoted $250. They said, can you reduce it by 20%? And she said, yes, but we'll also be taking away 20% of the services, and that is fair. All right, so that is my presentation, and I just wanted to show, if you don't mind, the Magic Money Formula worksheet. There's a QR code for it. If you want it, you're welcome to grab that, and we can share it later as well.
I love this. Thank you so much. This is, we were talking earlier, this is like Miracle Grow for your money tree, right? So download this. We'll drop that link in the chat. Anka, when you get a second, if you have that link, or we can pull it back up toward the end, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, Ilise. As a host and MC, I often fill the silent void with noise. So that's one that I need to go work on. Pause. Klaus, you have that like gravitas where you can say things and just leave it. Is that one of the strategies you use?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, wait, hang on, Anka. Unmute him.
So I have silence because people mute me, and that makes it very easy to have gravitas, because you stand there and you go. I actually do it when I'm speaking on stage. I learned quite a few years ago that instead of having the if you just have silence instead, it gives you weird sort of cadence, but it works. So a little bit of that. So the first question I want to ask is, let's see if there's some people who are not frozen and who are actually seeing this and hearing us, because I see people saying, I'm frozen, it's terrible, but are
refresh the page, maybe. Just refresh. It could be the...
Yeah, I've been following along on LinkedIn, and it hasn't frozen at all for me on that tab. So
I was also fine.
Okay.
So I'm going to say a couple things first. Thank you, Elise. Super cool, super hands-on, super useful. And I love that you're here as well, because obviously you know your stuff, which is really nice. And we disagree on a lot, which is even better. I think of the 7 mistakes, I think I make 5 of them regularly on purpose. So I think that is lovely, because then people can get some different ideas, and they can say, you know what, I like that, or I really did not like that. So first question, and a couple of answers in the chat will be nice. You can just write more or less. Right now you see me in my nice blue shirt, and I look sort of businessy but casual. If I put on this, which is a Batman jacket, and I put on these, did the price just go up or down? And if none of you answer in the chat, it's going to go from kind of gravitas silence to just weird.
I can answer.
Me too.
Take it away, Liz. What do you say?
I would say the price just went up.
It did, right?
Also, remember, there's a slight delay on the live stream, so give them just a moment to respond, because on live we just saw it and the price went way up.
Mm-hmm.
Up. It's
up, right?
Up.
So with that in mind, I want to share a couple things that you might find useful. Thank you, all of you. And I think it's pretty clear where that took us. So now, because I want you to feel comfortable that I'm not going to send you an expensive invoice afterwards, I took off the jacket again. So now the price has gone down again. But you're still
No, wait, but hold on. I just saw Trace's come through, and he said the price went down for B2B, but up for Comic-Con. So what do you think about that?
Bingo, right? I love that. I was hoping some people would say down. I would never hire a guy in a Batman suit, and some people would say, ooh, up. Because the reality is, no matter what you're doing, no matter what you're selling, no matter what your price is, some people will be buying something other than what you're selling. One of my key moments was realizing some time ago that people bought me for what I knew. Yes, they did. But they also bought me for being the guy who gets up on stage in front of 500 people in a Batman suit and says, Hello. And some of them buy that more than the expertise. And I've had clients come up afterwards and say, I was impressed at how much I learned. And I thought, well, you're paying me 10,000 euros to give this talk. Thank you for that. But maybe that was part of the agreement. And I realized that while they don't always say it, they're buying something different from what I say I'm selling. So that's number one thing is no matter what you are, no matter what you do, no matter what your pricing is, realizing what you're actually selling and what people are actually buying. And if you can align those, then you'll have an easier time. And they're not necessarily the same. So that's the first thing. Second is I want to talk a little bit about price points. So one of my, shall we say, truths or whatever we want to call it is there are only 5 price points. Doesn't matter if you're selling ice sculptures or you're selling hotshot business consulting or you're selling foot massages or lawn mowing. And you all disappeared. Are you still here?
Yes, we are here. We just give you the floor. We gave you the floor.
Perfect. I take the floor. Thank you. So it doesn't matter what you're selling. There are 5 price points. First of all, there's the one in the middle. It's not the FU finger this time. It's just the middle finger. This is the reasonable price, the price that is just a price, right? If you're in a supermarket, there's a price for milk. In Denmark, it's like $2 for a liter of milk. Nobody's going to think twice about that. Nobody's going to think it's expensive. Nobody's going to think it's cheap. It could also be $2.20 or it could be $1.80 or even $2.50. And it would still be it's just a price. It's the reasonable price that nobody blinks at, but shows you are a serious product or serious service within some industry and you're fine. The price is reasonable. Then you can sell discount. You can sell the cheap stuff. You can be Ryanair or Southwest Airlines, or you can be like a budget shoemaker, or you can be cheaplawyers.com. That's fine. If you're saying we are discount, we present as discount, and you're selling at lower prices, people will understand that. There's a lot of money in that. Low budget airlines some of them are very, very profitable because they say you're getting it cheaper, but you're also getting less. So there's trust. Where if you go out and you say, we're the cheapest on the market, and we're also the best, then people will say, yeah, but are you really? Are you? Because if you were, then no, we don't trust you. But if you say we're cheap, but you're getting less, that's a price. That's a price point. If you say these are the yucky foods, or this is the cheap dentist, or whatever it is, there's a market for that until you reach this finger, right? Reasonable, cheap, too cheap. This is cheapbrainsurgery.com. Not a lot of customers for them. This is the people who say, you might get the cheap lawyers who say, oh, we're just out of law school and we charge $120 per hour in Los Angeles and we know it's cheap, but we're also really fresh. And people say, okay, I could use that. But if we say, hey, we're the cheap lawyers, we cost $20 an hour. Do you want us to do your legal work? They say, no, you're not getting anywhere near my business at all because you're too cheap. You're unreasonably cheap. And that makes you lose trust. Reasonable, cheap, too cheap. Then there's premium. Then there's the nice stuff. Then there's when you put on the nice suit. Oh, I have it even here, right? If we're going for the slightly more corporate, the slick back hair, and it's the premium thing, right? It's still not too expensive to be believable. I'm not saying I charge $1 million an hour, but it's premium. It's nice. We've got a lot of that. There's airlines that are nice. There's oranges that are nice. There's ice sculptures. There are sports paraphernalia. Whatever you're in, there are people who charge premium. You charge a higher amount, but you also present nicer and you need to deliver something nicer. And then you have ridiculous. Then you have the too high price. You have, well, these shoes cost $20,000. I'm like, oh, okay. That's a lot because the other shoes in the store are 50 to 100. So these are 20,000. Yes, this is true, monsieur, because now we're in Paris and somebody thinks they could get away to it. But the reality is this is too expensive. This is ridiculous. This is also untrustworthy. Now, the problem with these 5, and I hear some of you, I hear you through the screen that you're already thinking, oh, but there are shoes that cost 20,000, Klaus. Who knows anything about pricing now? Well, the reality is that those 5 prices, from reasonable to cheap to premium to too cheap to too expensive, they are in all industries, all places in the world, but They only work if you understand the industry. When you're going to watch a movie, or you're going to book a flight, or you're going to go sleep in a hotel, then you have an idea of how that industry works. Most of you will already have an idea that, oh, what does a medium kind of price hotel room cost? And what's a reasonable thing to pay for ice cream at a corner store at midnight because you have cravings, right? We know that because we are sophisticated consumers, not in the way that we sip rosé and quote Shakespeare, but because we understand the market. Now, the tricky thing is when you get to the point where you don't understand what you're buying, this all goes out the window. Then you have no idea if something is reasonable, if it's cheap, if it's expensive, if it's too cheap or too expensive. All you know then is the presentation. The pizzeria you walk into somewhere in Turkmenistan, is it supposed to cost $5 for the pizza? Is it supposed to cost 50 or 50 cents? You have no idea. You only know how it's presented. And just to give a real life example of this, my cousins and my uncle and aunt were many years ago. They traveled for like 9 months and they did backpacking in Southeast Asia. Really nice. And at some point they were in the Philippines, and for a week they lived in this hut in the forest. Beautiful place, nature, and every morning this guy would come, friendly local Philippine guy, and he would come and he would sell them these huge banana breads that he'd made because he was a baker. And he'd sell them, and they would buy them for what was the equivalent of about 8 cents, 8 United States cents for this huge bread. And in Denmark at that time, something like that would probably cost 20 times as much. And they thought, oh my God, this is the best. And they talked to the guy and they got to know him, and they got these beautiful breads. And they said, hey, should we pay you more? And he said, no, this is the price. And they were happy. And on the last day of that trip, they come out earlier than normal, and they come out to the sounds of fighting, fist fighting and yelling. And there's their guy, the bread guy, and there are other bread guys, and they're beating up their bread guy. And they go, hey, what the hell's going on here? And one of the other bread guys says, this guy's been cheating you. He said, what? But he's been selling us these beautiful banana breads, and we've heard about his family, and they've been so cheap. And I said, yeah, you think so, because you've paid 8 cents for a banana bread, but the price normally here is 1/10 of that. So this guy had been 10x overcharging these rich white tourists who had no idea, because they only looked at the presentation and what their idea of reasonable was. They had no idea about the market. They were, in this case, very unsophisticated customers. So they paid 10x on the list price, and they had no idea. And whatever you're doing, if you are selling to sophisticated customers, then you need to be very aware of the price. You need to find ways to stand out. Are you an expert in the French market, or do you only clip the toenails of bulldogs, or are your ice sculptures very sustainable and made out of special water? Whatever it is, you need to stand out. But if you're going for unsophisticated customers, people who don't know how to value, people who don't know what to kind of compare you with, then you're in a completely different ballgame. And one of the things is that they will look at you based on what their reality is, right? Sometimes if I have to give an hourly rate, I don't like doing it, just like Ilise. But when people ask me for an hourly rate and I can't get out of it, my standard hourly rate is $900 US. And some people go, oh, that's crazy, Claus. That is really high. I thought that's unreasonable. Nobody would pay that. Some people say, oh, that's high, but I guess you're premium, so fair enough. Some people say, okay, fair enough, let's start working. Some people said, oh, but I thought you were good. Now I'm having second thoughts. $900 an hour, that's, in my book, that's cheap. And there are even people who say, oh, but you're not serious. I got you recommended, but apparently you're not serious, because then you'd charge a real price, because they don't know how to value what I have. And that means they can only look at where they are and on the presentation. So that's the first thing, 5 prices. And you think they matter more than they do, because most of your clients, unless you're buying or unless you're selling to people who are very sophisticated within what you're selling, then most of them will have no idea. If you are selling, let's say you're a visual artist that sells these like beautiful visual sketches to somebody who hires 20 people like you a month, yes, then pricing matters. Yes, then understanding the market matters. Yes, all these things. But if you're selling it to somebody else, then it doesn't so much matter how you compare it to the existing offers, because you don't know what they are. And most of all, your customers don't know what they are. Unsophisticated versus sophisticated, 5 prices. Number 1. Number 2 thing is, once you are there, understand that people, if they don't know how to value it, what do they do then? Well, they use what we call substitution questions. They try to find out what the value is when they don't know what the value is. And one of the ways we do that is, I'm going to show you this book. Ooh, pricing expertise. Oh, now I'm going to give you 3 options, and you're going to base the price of the book. You already know it, right? So this is just an exercise. You're going to base the price of the book in your head, and you're going to base it on getting 3 different types of information. In scenario number 1, I say, it took me 2 weeks to write together with Philip. And then Igor, who illustrated it, Igor has made these nice illustrations that explain what we're doing. And then Igor spent a week illustrating it. So 3 weeks from start of the idea to finished book. That's option 1. Option 2 is it took us half a year to write, including Igor's work. Option 3 is it took us 2 years to put this together, including Igor's work. Now, if you know nothing else, you haven't opened the book, you don't know me, you don't know Igor, you don't know Philip, you only have these things, then most people will say, oh, it took 2 years. Good. Oh, it took 3 weeks. Ooh, that's not good. That's too fast. How good can it really be? And if they say, oh, 6 months, that sounds reasonable. Because when we don't know anything, then we substitute with things like, is it larger? Did it take longer time to produce? Were more people involved? Were there simply more of the thing? Is it heavier? Is it bigger? Is it more sturdy? If you give people, this is a famous test from the Danish television company, Bang & Olufsen. They sell these high-end, really, really expensive TVs and radio sets, that sort of thing. They've been in the business forever. And they made some experiments with their remote controls, because at some time in the 80s, remote control technology became so good that you could have these lightweight remote controls. And they found that people, at some point, it got to the point where they thought their remote control felt cheap. So Bang & Olufsen said, oh, if you feel it's cheap, well, we'll give you something in metal and we'll put a weight inside it. It made it less comfortable for the hand. It made it more likely to break. It made it more expensive to produce. But the consumer would rather have something where, if they don't, how you value a remote control, right? Who knows that? Then they would rather have something that was heavier and more sturdy. Forget about the aesthetics for a moment. Here we were just talking about sturdiness and heaviness and like solidity, because we understand that, we value that. Just like if you take 2 paintings from the same artist. Now, right now, these are by my better half, Sue, and who's a digital artist. And they're actually the same size. These are just further down in the room. But if you imagine for a moment that these here are bigger than those down there, same artist, same motif, then most of you, if I asked you which ones are more expensive, and you for a moment ignore the fact that some of them have white backgrounds, that might play in, but most of you would then say the bigger ones are more expensive. I say, okay, but is it because we're talking something that might cost $600 or $800 or $1,200. We're talking something where the production part of it is a tiny part. And yet you would probably say, yeah, but the bigger one is more expensive. Just like if I show you the 2 books here. One is hardcover, nice production value. The other is softcover. Which one is more expensive? For most people, it's the hardcover one. For us, we charge 560, whether 560 euros, whether it is the hardcover one, whether it's the softcover one, whether you just get the PDF, because the value is not in the production, the value is in the book itself. And we don't care if you want it in PDF or in softcover or in hardcover. Some people want it softcover so they can put it in their backpack at a conference. Some people want it hardcover so they can have it sitting on a shelf and never open it. Some people just want the PDF because they're just going to open it on their laptops anyway. And when people say, oh, but can I have all 3 of them? We say, of course you can, because the value is giving people the information that's inside. It's not the formula. So if one of you said, I'd like to buy the book, well, I'll happily send you one of each and the PDF. That's the nice thing about charging 560 euros for a book. You can afford to send 2 of them. Now, if we don't know, then we substitute for what we do know. And finally, the last thing I'm going to leave you with, and then I'm going to shut up and hope I didn't go too much over time, is most of us would like to pay with one thing. It's called OPM. It's a kind of a pop smart real estate term. It's called other people's money. If I give you a deal where I say, I'm going to charge you this and that, then you might say yes, you might say no, depending on trust. And do you think it's valuable? And do you think it's going to deliver and all that sort of thing? But If I say, how about we look at how much you're earning right now and how much you think you would earn without my help, and then you get my help, and then I take a percentage of that on top of that, then suddenly the whole picture changes. Suddenly you're not paying with your money, you're paying with other people's money. It's why people want to give percentages of sales or kickbacks or all sorts of things. They want to pay once they've been paid, because then they're not paying, they're paying with somebody else's money, even if they pay a lot more. It's much easier to get people to pay 30% of the bonus they get, the extra sale they get, than to get them to pay 5% of their own money, even if they think it's going to work. Even if they think it's going to work, because we're all more comfortable paying with other people's money. Okay, now it's time for
that's a whole nother conversation, Klaus,
Bam.
because I know that I and a lot of other people get offered these affiliate opportunities all the time. And I'm like, you have to weigh. I have to focus on selling my own business, not making money by selling your business. So I struggle with that for sure. But let's do a whole nother webinar on that. How to properly structure affiliates. Okay, so the questions that I was seeing in the chat while you're talking is still around comparison. Like, if I don't know what other people like me are charging, how do I set my rate? And yet I would argue, like Leanne Velke, there are no other people like you. So when it comes to comparing, that's not a thing. But how do you even set it? You just start asking different potential clients different numbers and see what lands?
No, I cheat. I do all the things Ilise said we shouldn't do. I say yes to people before I know the price. People who've worked with me will know I literally tell them, yes, I'll do it. And then you need to tell me how much money you have. And if it's a speaking gig, I do a lot of speaking gigs, right? And I tell people, well, yes, I'll do it. And tell me what money you have, and then I'll do it for that. And if you've got $12,000, I'll take 12. If you've got 8, I'll take 8. If you've got 3, I'll take 3. And if you've got nothing, I'll do it anyway with a smile, but then you at least buy me a good lunch. And what happens is, because, and Ilise said this nicely, said most people want to be fair. They want to be on your side. What I find is some people say, oh my God, that's so nice, because we've got no money and we'd really like what you have to offer. So thank you for being so nice to work with. And some of them even come back later and say, this time we have money. Thanks for being generous. This time I can pay. Some people say, oh, that's cool, because we were worried. We only have 3,000. We were sure we couldn't get you for that. And some people say, okay, great. Well, we've got 9.5 or 15 or whatever it is. Will that work? And I say, sure. And of course, I like getting paid $10,000 more than I like getting paid $1,000. Let's not kid ourselves. But I say yes to the things before I know what the price is, up to a certain point. And if I feel they're trying to take advantage of me, then I can, of course, just back up. If I get people who say, great, oh, so you're an easy pushover, and I've been to negotiating school, then here's how it's going to work. Then I say, you know what? I feel we're not on the same page here. And then it's a very different matter. I have no problem just setting a price and then having people either say yes or no. But I find that there are two approaches that work for me. One is saying, we're in this together. I'm happy to do it, whether it's coaching or speaking or whatever. What do you have? And then we'll work out of that. Maybe with some anchoring to give them ideas. The 500, 5,000 or 50,000, I use that seriously, not those numbers, but something with that range. Or the other option is to say, here's the price, take it or leave it. Right? There are plenty of things where I say, this is the price, this is the thing, take it or leave it.
And I think some of that maybe also comes with positioning and confidence, because if maybe you just got laid off from corporate, you're just now trying to be a freelancer, you're trying to do the math on what I was paid hourly for my corporate job. Now I could translate that into being a freelancer. The things that I'm looking to take on are a little bit more almost logistical, project oriented, versus the people that are coming out and saying, I'm a strategist, you're taking all of my knowledge and I'm creating a plan for you. And so I think when you first come out on the scene as a freelancer, how do you decide like which one of those you want to position yourself as? One feels like you could get more money than the other, but maybe you're not confident calling yourself at that level. Is there a process to get over that mental anguish?
So one of the things we write in the book is we say, this is one of Philip's smarter ideas. We say that what people call strategy is being in the void of maybes, where there's 1,000 factors. And then you choose 3 of them and say, these matter. And then you do like this with all the rest. And then you say, we're going that way. So,
I remember when I was young in my career, I was probably 24 years old. I called my dad and I was like, I figured it out, Dad. I'm going to become a strategist, because right now I am living in spreadsheets and I'm working 12 hours a day, but the people with strategy in their title leave at 5. I don't understand. And they're getting paid more.
That's a thing, right? Titles are a thing, presentation, who do you say yes to, who do not? And I think there's a core thing here. This is an American entrepreneur. I think her name is Cody Sanchez. She does these nice YouTube videos on investing and stuff like that. And she says in one of them, she says, if you go out and you want to sell bottled water, and if you go next to a public fountain and try to sell bottled water, that's going to be hard. If you go to a desert and find people there, that's going to be a much easier sell. And if those people are having a race in that desert, it's going to be even easier. And if those people are rich people having a race in the desert, now you're in business. And part of that is I see so many people worry so much about what am I worth? Nothing, everything. Who the fuck cares? Number two, I see people who worry about what are other people getting. Well, Jacques, who I was on a project with 8 years ago, he gets 75, so I should get 77. But what about Michelle, who once met Jacques and now does? Who cares? If it makes your life work, then charge that. I tell people straight out, I crashed my company. I never really cared about money. Suddenly I found myself in this massive, massive debt. Some of that 1.1 million was 17% interest. I needed to learn how to price myself in a completely different way, because if not, I couldn't get things to work. It wasn't a matter of what's realistic or about what's fair. I said, well, this is the price. And then some people said, okay, we'll pay it. And some people said, we could never. But the moment you get into this idea of fairness and comparison, what the hell is that, right? This thing we're doing right now, let's say we should put a price on what the 4 of us are doing. Let's not even talk about what the audience is doing, how much we should be paying them, which is also fair, right? If there was no audience, why would we be here? But let's just talk about what the 4 of us are doing. Who of us is providing the most value? Is it Ilise? Maybe. Is it me? Maybe. Is it you, Liz? Maybe. Is it Anka? Maybe. Even that, we don't know. And even if we did, even if we could agree on that and rank ours, which I don't think we can, then who is it? Should I be paid 600 for this? Should I be paid 6,000 or 60? And by who and why? Much easier to just say, I'll do it. I'm going to charge 8,000. Do you want it or not? And then they say, well, we've only got 3. And then
I love when you take it back to this value thing, because look at Seth Godin right now. You can pay Seth Godin $50,000 to be on stage and come to your event at any time, day or night throughout the year. But right now he's on a book tour, and you can get him for free or cheap because he's out there trying to market his book, and he knows that he needs to go get all of the brand awareness he possibly can for it. So
here's what let me just add something here, because I think underlying everything that we're saying is the difference between focusing on yourself and what I'm worth, or what the value is of me, which I don't think makes a lot of sense, and focusing on the market and what the market will bear, what the market can afford, and what the market needs. And so even to the question of how do I decide how to position myself, I would always say, well, what does the market need that you can provide, and how much will they pay for it? Let's start there.
And that's a great place to start. And that's also why, while I completely respect what you say, Ilise, about don't give discounts, reduce scope, I do the exact opposite. I will happily say I can see somebody in the chat who was somebody I did some coaching for, and said, well, what have you got? I said, here's what I'll charge. I said, well, I can't afford that. Here's what I can afford. Great, we'll do it at that. We could have reduced the scope. That's one way of doing it. I prefer doing the work that I find interesting and fun and impactful and all these sorts of things. And then the money is kind of an extra thing. And the nice thing about that is it's hard to get there. But if you can get away with that, then you only do stuff that you find enjoyable. And sometimes people pay you, right? If we imagine that the way my pricing works is quite simple, that I ask people, here's what we're going to do together, and I only say yes if it's something I want to do. And then if it gives money, good. If it doesn't, then good. And if enough of them give money, then that works. Which is also, if somebody's curious, then I'll just post it here. Just if you go to this, just for the exercise, if you go to extraordinary.college, which is the website for the College of Extraordinary Experiences, and you ask for apply for an invitation, it will say, one, there's some like legal stuff about collecting information, And the next page is you choose what you're going to pay. And there are 3 different payment tiers, and there's no difference in what you're getting. And they are even called pay the standard price, pay more, pay less. And some people say, why would I pay more? And then we say, because that means somebody else can afford to pay less. And then some people go, you guys are idiots, I'll pay less. And most of them go, I've never seen that. I like that. Let me think for a moment. No, I guess I need the cheap one. Thank you for the option. Or I can afford to pay more if it means somebody else pays less. But it's about changing the game.
It's amazing. But I'm curious. In the last, because you just organized a few weeks ago an event. I'm calling it event. It's an experience. I saw it. I saw some things of it. What do people choose out of the registrants, out of the participants? What did they choose?
So we get most people who choose the cheapest option, but we get a quite large percentage who choose both the middle and the most expensive. And we get actually, if I'm right now looking at people who've applied for next year, I think it's a pretty even split between the ones who say pay more, which is 8,400 euros for the event, ones who say pay the standard price, which is 5,600, and the ones who say pay less, which is 2,800. In fact, I think we have fewest of the 2,800s at the moment.
People choose, in fact, to support others. They pay.
Yes.
Amazing.
And we're transparent, and we write, and we even have we call them fate tickets, where we say, if you can't come, but if you have no money but would like to come, then we have some tickets, some spots set aside for that. Of course, we have limited numbers of them because we need to pay for the castle events.
So let's bring us back a little bit to like actual freelancers and not events and experiences and coaching and masterminds and that stuff. So if you're trying to set pricing and you are, the majority of our audience here are event professionals. And so we're either doing projects or we're running an entire conference or we're taking a work stream off of someone's hands. When I look at coaches and business mentors, the idea of using other people's money is possible because we're saying, I can increase your revenue by this much. Therefore, you're not even paying me. It's coming from what I've done. If you're doing an event, we tend to be viewed as the L on the P&L, not the P on the P&L. How do we shift the fact that we are, in fact, driving revenue to the business, even if the budget for the event isn't the business revenue?
Don't be looked as the L.
But how? Like if I'm taking a work stream, if I'm taking all the BEOs off your hand, I will do all 122 BEOs and I will check to make sure you have the right number of bartenders, the right amount of chicken, blah, 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 blah. So how can I position that as I am adding value to the fact that you're now bringing in more money?
Sure. Okay. So maybe that was a little bit harsh before saying either you need to not be the L, but the P, or you need to make them understand why it is that it costs money. The easiest thing in the world, and we all do this, and I'm guilty of this as well, is looking at somebody else and saying, I'd like you to fix my thing, and I'm also going to tell you it's not that hard. If you're in that conversation, then probably the people you work for are not going to pay that much. If they instead go to you and say, I would like you to fix this thing, and I know it's hard, and that's why I want you to fix it, because at the end it's going to cost me more time or more money or more whatever, then it's a different story.
Okay, so if I rephrase it and say, by taking 147 BEOs off your plate, making sure that I can go through them, I could probably save you 27% on your food costs because I will find extra food waste that you're not needing, bartenders you're paying for that you don't need, and you will find other people's money in hiring me to go through that work stream. So that's,
for example, yes, that is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is getting them to understand that by them doing it, they're using a more expensive resource. One of the things I see, and I coach a lot of entrepreneurs where what they are stuck in when they were just them, right? When you're just you fix the printers and you do the website and you take care of, you do everything because there's nobody else. And when people then start to grow or hire freelancers, they still often retain that mindset. And then you'll see people who have a sales director who's getting $100,000 a year, but the CEO and founder, who now has 50 people, is still fixing the printer to save money. It's like,
So that's
no.
interesting because Sean's comment is similar to the line of, we have a committee already. Why do we need to pay you? Well, because paying me is actually less expensive than taking your committee, who should be out raising more money or should be out blah, 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 getting more members, whatever. Whereas I can go focus on these things so that they're working on the business, not in the business.
But here's where marketing comes in, actually, because the way you lay that foundation of trust and credibility and knowledge is through your marketing, and especially through content marketing. So anyone could create content that explains and justifies how this works and how people will save money. And that precedes you into the money conversation.
I like this. I always say content doesn't convert, but content builds trust, and trust converts.
Mhm.
So that's
And
that's the path.
if we revisit the Cody Sanchez rich people racing the desert for a moment, is that when somebody says, we have a committee already, why do we need you? Well, then you're trying to sell people who may be in the desert, but they brought their own water supply. And that's a harder sell. So if somebody comes and says, we have this and we need you, or we want you, it might not be a need, it might be a desire, right? I don't need Brad Pitt to come and serve me dinner, but it would be quite fun if he did, right? I think some people will say they need that, but let's not go into that discussion. But if you're neither serving a want nor a need, then it's going to be a tough sell. Then you're basically telling somebody, you should hire me because I think it would be smart for you, but you don't agree. It's much, much smarter finding the people, and the marketing talk is part of it, but it's also just about finding out, who are you selling to? Igor, our visualizer here, has a good friend who works with these graphic artists, and he works exclusively with people who've been burned by too cheap graphic artists.
Mm-hmm.
Because he said they don't set price.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. So Ilise, I want to go back to well, now I've completely lost what I wanted to go back to because I'm still sitting here thinking, what a great niche to go to people who've been burned by graphic designers.
I have a thought, actually, to add to something we were saying before about discounting, and maybe that will trigger something for you, Liz. But I was thinking that it's not that I'm against discounting. It's just that, especially at the beginning with a new client, you have to be careful of the precedent that you set, because it's very difficult to raise the price when you're basically just giving the same thing. And that's part of the money conversation. So when people's first impulse is to charge low just to get the client, then you're kind of settling for that into the future as well, thinking sometimes, oh, well, I can charge more later, but it's tricky.
So you 100% triggered what I was going to ask, which is the part where you said negotiation means you're a professional and you should be ready for that. I think the big fear is to go out and go, look, it's 15K, and have them go, then I can't afford you, and then never pick up the phone again without the opportunity to negotiate. So how do you say it's 15K, but I can work with you, without saying the but I can work with you part?
By doing exactly that. This is another of Ilise's things that I break consistently. I tell people, I'd like you to give me 15. I'm fine with 10. And if it's lower than 5, then it's not happening.
Or you can say, what if I told you it was going to be 15? Would you fall off your chair?
Yeah, I hear you. I just think here, I like the way of softening. I just think we disagree on this one.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that it's tempting to say, go in high so there's room to negotiate. Personally, I dislike that. I don't, if somebody comes into me and they say, hey, I have no problem with somebody saying, I'd like you to pay me $3,000 or $50,000, depending on what it is, but I could do it for cheaper, then I'm happy to pay them 50 if I have 50, but I'm also happy to go somewhere if I don't have that. If somebody goes to me and says, I need 15, and I say, oh, well, is that your lowest? Say, yeah, okay, well, I've only got 12. Well, I could do it for 12. To me, that's just killing trust right off the bat. I understand it. I understand it's a classic negotiating tactic. I just happen to disagree with it and don't practice it and don't like it. But it's not that it's not effective.
And part of it depends on how you're having the conversation, because a lot of these happen in email, and anyone can drop off the conversation and ghost you, they say, right? It feels like you're being ghosted. And that's why, again, I think in real time, in a Zoom call, in a phone call, like in real time is where we have to really have these money conversations.
That's a good point. But I think and we've had it happen to us before where we put the price and they go, oof, that's an extra zero we weren't planning. Then we're not. And we're like, then we start feeling like back to, well, wait, but we could drop the zero.
Or what were you thinking? Right? I mean, that's the next natural question. If this is too much, what are you thinking?
And then, as Sean said earlier, then you just have to know like when to hold them and when to fold them and know when to walk
what your
away
bottom line is.
You just can't do it for that.
But let's talk about something else as well in the minutes we have. We can go on if you are available. I'm Romanian in Brussels. It comes with an expectancy to be cheap. So what about that? The expectancy too, because also hirers all the time, yes, they have their in-house teams, and they have the many of them, as what I've saw, they have the expectation that a freelancer comes with a bigger pay than they can afford, so they just keep it to the inside team, to the in-house team. So how do we deal with that? No expectancy at all. Or no, an underpay expectancy since the beginning. This is the entire market story, the event market story. It comes with an underpaying expectancy somehow.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, this again is where marketing comes in, and you have to establish your credibility and your authority through marketing and try to counter that expectation, maybe even de-emphasize being Romanian. I don't know if that's, that happens a lot with Africans as well. I've had Africans come to me and say, they won't pay me because they think I'm in Nigeria. Like, well, let's not focus on that then. Let's focus on
Anka, I'm Romanian, but I live in Brussels. It's really expensive here.
What would you say, Claus?
I would say that one of the things that caused me to end up in an insane amount of debt was I wanted to run my business the way I wanted to run it. We did these insane events and people got tattoos and got married and could move to different countries. It wasn't what we were doing that wasn't good. That was like, we had proof that we were doing something cool, but we were selling to people who had no money and felt it was overpriced anyway. And what we should have done, and what I wish I'd done, was to stop selling to those people. Stop pricing based on what the people can afford. Start figuring out what is the price you would like to charge and find the people who are willing to do that. And it doesn't matter whether you're charging $20 an hour or $200 or $5,000. There are people who will pay. There are people who will find it cheap. There are people who will find it expensive. But you may not know how to reach them. So when somebody says, oh, but in Romania, this is expected, then I would say, and I know this is harsh, I'd say, don't sell to Romanians then. Right? Yeah. Or sell them something that they value or something they can afford. That it is so easy to say, but the people I work for have this expectation. Well, but that's like saying, I want to have when I go looking for a future wife, she needs to be 6'3", have a PhD, and also be a supermodel, plus she needs to be rich. Well, sure, that sounds good on paper, but there's other people vying for that, and maybe that's not actually what I'm going for. Maybe I should go somewhere else. And if you're going for the people, if you say, I want to serve these people, whether you want to marry them or sell to them, doesn't really matter that much, then you're going to do it on their terms. One of the breakthrough things in my career was I was part of a leadership startup at some point, like this really high-powered, insane amounts of money from the people in it, the partners. One of them said, if you want to learn how to sell to the Russians, you better learn how to speak Russian. Or she said more directly, she said, if you want to sell to the Russians, you better learn how to speak Russian. This was pre-Ukraine. It wasn't controversial then. She wasn't talking about actual Russians. Yeah. If you want to sell to people, you need to learn how to speak their language. And that's where, especially what Ilise says about marketing, I feel that comes in. That if you're constantly trying to sell to people who are at that water fountain, then you're going to be selling it on their terms. If you say, I insist on selling water near the free water fountain, well, no wonder they're not going to want to pay for it because you're selling it to them at the water fountain. And they can get it.
I know we're at time. I will say this morning, I was actually listening to a podcast on the way in that was talking about the who are you and what is your differentiator. And I know when I was at IMEX last week, I was asking the event tech companies to tell me their differentiator, and none of them had anything different. They all told me the exact same positioning, the exact same thing. And I think for event professionals, we've gone through some branding, personal branding classes, and they're all like, well, I can do everything. Like, well, if you can do everything, no one's going to hire you for anything. You really do have to figure out that positioning piece so that you can charge for it. And the one takeaway I got from, well, many, but the big one I got from the webinar was, or podcast was, finish this sentence. Only we can. So find that one thing that only you can do, and then price anchor around that, which I thought was really interesting. So only Claus has the confidence to show up in a Batman suit and charge $600 for a book.
No, I wanted to ask in the beginning, can women pull out Claus attitude ever?
Yes, but it's
Yes.
harder.
You think, huh?
Yeah, but it's harder.
Of course.
Really interesting. That's a whole nother one.
That's a whole other discussion.
Ilise, Claus, Anka, thank you all so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I love having disagreement and different perspectives. I think that we brought a lot of value to the folks that watched and that are going to catch the recording. Anka, first shot at producing. You did amazing. We'll get those flips and switches, and you figured it out so beautifully.
Yes.
Thank you all so much. And we will see you all back hopefully on Thursday. Anka, do you know what our topic is for Thursday?
Yes, we have a great one. We are again targeting, because we will repeat it every single time. Tuesdays are for freelancers, Thursdays are for hirers. So for organizations that hire freelancers. And on Thursday, we have Leah Ali and Rutger from Conversation Starter with the webinar called Find the Perfect Match, how to scope projects and vet freelancers.
Which I think is beautiful because it flies right into this. So here's a freelancer, we're setting our time and our value. And then on Thursday, as the hirer, we're trying to scope it appropriately to make the right decision and find freelancers that match that. I think this is awesome. And all leading up to our freelancer forum, which is November 5th, 6th, and 7th, where we're bringing freelancers and hirers together for 3 days of personalized networking and matchmaking to find people jobs. So thank you all so much. And we will see you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.